Let's see if this works. Okay, so the failure of humanity to see itself outside of itself. A case for androgyny. Just bear with me, this is a rough draft. It dawns on me today, October 9th, 2018, that we've grossly overstated ourselves as polarities. It isn't a surprise. I have, for many months, or the last few years, been touting about androgyny as the common truth to our nature. Why? Because the only animal that cares whether it's butch or femme enough is the human being. The rest of nature, by instinct or mimicry, follows its own path with little to no consequences to the role or function of sexual intercourse. That is to say, numerous animals off the top of my head function both as male and female, not in the sexual reproductive act, but in the life and or survival act. Females within nature are often alone. This means the mother not only raises offspring, but does everything else as well. Traditional male domination or indoor roles are out the window. So then the question is, why are we stuck on gender? A female tiger, a leopard, a cheetah, a bear, and more all assume both masculine and feminine roles. Not once is there a moment of hesitation when it comes to the natural drive or needs to determine what humans would classify as a masculine role. So why are humans so inconsistent on gender-specific roles? The trans community is forcing this issue to the forefront. I fear, though, most people are ill-equipped mentally or emotionally to even begin to question their own anger over towards this advancement within the human genome. It is proven in nature with the introduction of pollution to certain amphibian habitats that it forces sexual changes. In other words, frogs go from male to female. Frogs are well known for sex changes when pesticides, etc., are introduced by us to their environments. This then becomes a mechanism of survival. But we aren't frogs. We aren't even genetically related. Yet, here we are with a new level of humanity called transsexual at a time when pollution, chemical enhancement, and more are at the forefront in our environments. Is it chemicals? It's hard to say. One can go back 50 plus years and find stories of men who choose to live as women. It is all through our history. My recent research into Vikings had such tales, few and far between, but nonetheless they were there. Romans, Greeks, and others also had gender swaps in their societies. The Philippines has entire pageants where every contestant is a ladyboy, a term we use for those in Thailand who choose to live as the opposite sex. In the Philippines, they're called bading. But nonetheless, in the Philippines, they've had transsexuality for generations. So, except for the Western world, which has long prided itself on manly things and warmongering, roles haven't been as rigid as we want to believe. We allowed homosexuality to grow because we could find its history. Now, again, we're asked to dig deep into our history and find tellings of what can only be referred to as transsexual, mislabeled under gay. Once we clear those hurdles, we come to find acceptance of our modern brothers and sisters who would properly, brothers and sisters whom we properly should refer to as them, it, they, and on by their chosen pronoun. We must go one step further and abolish transsexuality along with heterosexuality, homosexuality. All sexuality should be removed. Any ideas of bias should be cast out as all are technically wrong based on the ideas of nature itself. Reproduction is not to be a definition by which, sorry, reproduction is not to be a definition of what it means to be a woman. Yes, it is what the female species is capable of. Yet, it is not the reality of what femininity is. Why should we marginalize ourselves by concluding that organs determine our realities? I'm sure much of the trans community has spoken of this themselves, so I ask the heterosexual community to look deep within itself and ask, what defines you as your essence? Your ability to reproduce determines nothing about who you are. Femme is not because of reproduction or the mere fact that one has breasts over no breasts. Men today are working towards their feelings, which is irony as men are coming to admit that they feel far more than they previously admitted to. Women are taking up the masculine roles now the world over, and yet we haven't recognized that we are not our roles, but we are energy. If a transsexual person is in the wrong body, the body is wrong, but it isn't about the body, it's about the energy, the vibration. Gender normative constructs are ingrained. Rosie the Riveter broke barriers during World War II saying we can, and they did. Now as the trans movement gains momentum, along with the binary, intersect, and more, people fight against the fear of dissolution. We can see that the next step altogether is pure abolishment of any definition of sexuality, which brings me to androgyny as a true classification which, as far as my senses go, fits or includes all people. To have no assumed roles and be all but hermaphroditic is essentially where we will be in less than 100 years. The Earth, its pollutions, our constant breeding, and a host of other traumas which we are part of and enabling is opening the door to this very truth. So, we must start to see this as a fact and begin to abolish sexuality. Culture has created sexuality, and now culture is moving beyond sexuality. The death throes we are currently in with the backlash of anger, racism, homophobia, transphobia, sexism, and more are all relevant to creating a pathway to an androgynous world. Sci-fi taught us through Star Trek, Isaac Asimov, and other writers that this would likely be our future. We now live in that exact flux through which this is manifesting. If we suddenly destroyed half the planet, what would happen after the chaos? We would be rebuilding. Now, when that takes place, let's assume that the millennial generation is the most prevalent group. They're not going to rebuild the current system governed and created by rich old white men. They will create a new world with some aspects of the old, like commerce and some form of a moral code. But that code is going to be so far removed from the restrictions of modern day as to seem futuristic or absurd. The generation under them will reconstruct this framework or system as they grow into power, and we will again see a new world so far removed from the one we currently have. So, then why are we choking in 2018 on fear? Why in 2018 are we choking on change? The polarization pushed onto us by politics is absurd. But here it is. We can't even sit down and talk about things because people are more concerned with being angry, which is fear-based, than they are about being loving. Yet the abolishing of sexuality has to happen just as much as an end to racism. So long as we see the construct of the very thing we need to change, we will refuse to change it. Power is the truest weapon, but fear is not power. Change is power, and we need to change so much. And what do we fear? We fear that change because we don't know what's on the other side, and we fear what's coming. If we can agree that our flesh, our universe, everything we know to be real are atoms in motion at a very slow rate called density, we can start to agree that something as redundant in sexuality is no more than energy. For thousands of years, we've been ignorant of the truth. We now live again in an age of knowledge and understanding. So now it is time to become aware of what we are not. The roles or prisons we have placed on ourselves through identification, such as sexuality, because of society, need to be scrapped. Any identity that conforms to the physical form is slavery. And that's what came to me today when I was in meditation, because literally that's what it is. I mean, I'm becoming gender fluid now. Do I become a trans person? I don't know. I mean, every day I still struggle with the gender fluidity and allowing myself the ability to be more femme because I was brought up to be masculine. My mother didn't want a gay kid. My friends didn't want a femme friend. There was a lot of like hostility, not exactly direct hostility in that sense, but metaphorically, there's a lot of hostility in the sense that I was suppressed to being who I wanted to be. This is true of everybody else. And the more that we focus on constructs based on society and gender constructs and such, the harder it's going to be for us to break it, the further the backlash is going to be towards us when we approach people to change what they believe. Cognitive dissonance is what sexuality is. I mean, we have literally decided that a man's role is X, Y, and Z, and we have decided a woman's role is X, Y, and Z, and even today, women are treated less than men are. So what's changing? I mean, we're allowing women to do things that men have been, doing. But we have to look at sexuality as an old paradigm, something that needs to leave. We need to stop deciding that because a person has a penis or a person has a breast, that defines the very nature of exactly who and what they're going to be. So I hope you guys like what I posted. Feel free to comment, all that jibbly jazz. And yeah, this will be a good conversation if we actually get to have one.